Hello, this is Dr. Grande. Today I will analyze the case of Jeanie Childs and Jerry Westrom. First I'll look at the background of this case, move to the timeline of the crime, then offer my analysis. Jeanie Ann Childs was born on April 21, 1958, and lived in Minneapolis, Minnesota. When she was young, her father was murdered. As a teenager, Jeanie was rebellious, used drugs, and frequently ran away from home. She engaged in sex work and was arrested multiple times. Jeanie married and divorced twice. Eventually, she ended up living in an apartment at 3121 Pillsbury Avenue. The unit, which was number 2104, was rented by her business manager and boyfriend, Arthur Gray. Many men visited the apartment so that Jeanie could provide services to them. The other key player in the story is Jerry Arnold Westrom. He was born on May 16, 1966, and raised in Minnesota. In May 1994, he married. Jerry and his wife went on to have 2 children. In 2000, he opened a convenience store and gas station, but it went out of business in 2008. Jerry decided to become a farmer using property that had been in his family for years. He grew corn and soybeans. Jerry also sold crop insurance and was described as a good salesperson. He and his family lived in the town of Asante, 38 miles north of Minneapolis. Before moving to the timeline of the crime, let's hear a word from today's sponsor, Delete Me. Over the past few years, I have covered a lot of stalking cases which involve a perpetrator easily finding personal information online. When people try to get this information removed, they find out it's extremely time-consuming. Fortunately, there is a solution. Delete Me is a subscription service that can eliminate this type of personal information that is for sale online. They have the straightforward mission of removing customers' information from search results and upholding your right to manage and remove your personal information. The privacy experts at Delete Me work continually to remove information from hundreds of data brokers. This gets rid of your personal data like address, occupation, marital status, age, names of relatives, and so on. How does it work? Submit your information to Delete Me, and their experts remove it. After that, they check every 3 months to make sure any new data get removed as well. If you want your personal information removed from search results on the web, go to joindeleteme.com/drgrande. Delete Me is offering 20% off their privacy plans to all my viewers with my code Dr. Grande. Again, that's joindeleteme.com/drgrande, promo code Dr. Grande. Now moving to the timeline of the crime. On June 13, 1993, at 5:30 p.m., Jeanie Childs was in her boyfriend's apartment, Unit 2104. A neighbor in Unit 2105 reported that water was running into their apartment. When staff from the apartment building investigated, they realized the water was coming from apartment 2104. They entered the apartment and found the problem. The shower had been running and overflowed. While they were in the apartment, they found Jeanie Childs dead under her mattress on the bedroom floor and contacted the police. Here's what the police found during the course of their investigation. Jeanie had been stabbed about 65 times. Many of her injuries were post-mortem. She was lying face up on the floor of her bedroom with a mattress on top of her. There was no clothing on her body except for a pair of socks. There was no evidence of forced entry, and no murder weapon was recovered. Blood was found in many places, including on the walls of the bedroom, on the mattress, on the comforter, and in the bathroom. A few bloody footprints were found near the window. It appeared as though these footprints had been made by a bare foot. Multiple DNA profiles were found in the apartment, which was not surprising considering Jeanie's line of work. Many of these profiles were never identified. The first obvious potential suspect was Jeanie's business manager and boyfriend, Arthur Gray. His hair was found in Jeanie's left hand, and his DNA was on the comforter. The police decided that Arthur was not the killer after they realized his footprints did not match the footprints made in the blood near the window, and a friend of his corroborated Arthur's alibi. Arthur said that he was at a motorcycle rally in Wisconsin at the time of the murder. In the early 1990s, the police in Minneapolis were dealing with a lot of murders and other serious crimes. They didn't have enough resources to thoroughly investigate every case. Considering how the evidence in Jeannie's murder no longer pointed to an obvious suspect, the police decided to focus their energy on other cases. The investigation into Jeannie's murder was put on the back burner, and the case went cold. 23 years later, in 2016, the police decided to take another look at the case. DNA analysis had improved significantly, and there were many new tools available to investigators. As I mentioned, multiple unknown DNA profiles were found in the apartment where Jeanie was murdered. Investigators noticed that a similar male profile was found in multiple places in the apartment, specifically on the comforter, a blue towel, a blue washcloth, a red t-shirt, and on the bathroom sink. They decided to focus their efforts on this profile because it seemed likely that whoever left this DNA was the killer. His DNA was on many items directly connected to the murder and the cleanup effort. In 2018, genetic genealogy identified Jerry Westrom as a potential source of the crime scene DNA. Jerry did not have any known relationship with Jeanie, but considering how she was a sex worker, the police thought that maybe Jerry had been a customer. Perhaps when he was in her apartment, there was some type of argument, and he stabbed her to death. Investigators wanted to collect a sample of DNA from Jerry without him knowing. They learned from his social media that he was going to attend a hockey game in the state of Wisconsin in January 2019. They followed him there. During the game, Jerry went to the concession stand and purchased a hot dog. After consuming this hot dog, he wiped his mouth on a napkin and threw it away. Investigators retrieved the napkin, which contained his DNA. From Jerry's perspective, this turned out to be one expensive hot dog. Lab results indicated that Jerry's DNA was a match to the DNA found at the scene of Jeannie's murder. His DNA was on the comforter, the blue towel, the red t-shirt, and the bathroom sink. Furthermore, it appeared as though his DNA was part of a mixture found on the blue washcloth. In February 2019, Jerry Westrom was arrested and charged with murder. Investigators believe that at least one of the footprints found at the crime scene were a match to Jerry's foot. His trial started on August 16, 2022. On September 1, Jerry Westrom was found guilty of first-degree premeditated murder and second-degree murder. On September 9, 2022, he was sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 30 years. Later, on appeal, the second-degree murder conviction was overturned, but the court upheld the conviction for first-degree premeditated murder. Nothing changed with Jerry's sentence. When it comes to a minimum sentence for life in prison, the state of Minnesota does not allow prisoners to accrue any good time. Jerry is not going to be able to reduce that 30 years. This means he will have to serve every day of this 30 years at a minimum. He will be eligible for parole in 2052 at the age of 86. Now moving to my analysis. Jerry Westrom maintains his innocence, and he has quite a few supporters. They argue that Jeanie Childs could have been killed by any number of men who spent time in apartment 2104. The defense indicated there were 5 alternative suspects, but they were only allowed to present one, Jeannie's business manager and boyfriend, Arthur Gray. The state of Minnesota, of course, disagrees. They argue that DNA and footprints placed Jerry in the apartment at the time of the murder. He must have been the killer. This brings me to the question, was Jerry Westrom guilty of murder? Let's take a look at the evidence, both for and against the idea he is guilty, starting with the inculpatory factors. Jerry Westrom lived in the Minneapolis area from April 1991 to December 1993. Jeanie Childs was murdered in June 1993. Jerry appeared to have difficulty regulating his intake of alcohol, and he had a criminal record. In 2004, he was convicted of carrying a pistol without a permit and driving while intoxicated. In 2011, he was convicted of DWI for the second time. In 2012, he was arrested for DWI and hiring a prostitute. He pleaded guilty to the DWI charge, his third offense. In 2015, Jerry was convicted of solicitation of prostitution. Jerry's DNA was found in the apartment where Jeanie was murdered. Multiple male profiles were discovered there, so that doesn't necessarily mean anything, but the exact locations of Jerry's DNA are important. His DNA was in 5 different places associated with the murder and the cleanup. If Jerry had only engaged Jeannie's services and nothing else, how did his DNA end up in all those locations. During an 11-minute interview with the police after he was arrested, Jerry said he didn't recognize Jeanie, he denied ever being in the apartment occupied by her, and he claimed he had no idea how his DNA was there. It appears as though Jerry was lying. Investigators claim that Jerry's foot was a match to a footprint found in blood. This suggests that Jerry was in the apartment at the time Jeanie was killed. The DNA could have been there for a long time, but the footprints were made at the time of the murder. Now moving to the exculpatory factors. Jerry may have denied being in the apartment because he didn't want to be accused of murder. He was embarrassed about using the services of a sex worker, or both. His DNA was found in the apartment, but the police don't know when it was deposited. It could have been there from a prior non-homicidal encounter, even in these suspicious locations. The DNA from many unidentified males was found in the apartment. Why wasn't genetic genealogy used to identify the contributors of this DNA? In a stairwell outside Jeanie's apartment, blood from a man was found. The police were able to identify him. He claimed he could not remember how his blood ended up there. He had only visited the building one time in 1991, 2 years before the murder. In 1994, 1 year after the murder, another woman was killed in the area under similar circumstances. This killer, who was identified by the police and arrested, also left footprints at the murder scene. The killer's DNA was found in the apartment Jeanie was using. On the day Jeanie was murdered, a neighbor saw her with a tall man with blonde hair who was wearing a trench coat. Later, the neighbor saw the same man running down a stairwell alone, not wearing the trench coat. Arthur Gray seemed like a pretty good potential suspect. He was Jeanie's business manager, and his hair was found in Jeanie's left hand. Arthur had an alibi, but maybe it was fabricated. Investigators claim that Jerry's foot matched at least one of the footprints in blood found in the apartment. However, the science behind footprint analysis is not well established. Most offenders wear shoes. Therefore, footprints are not typically found at crime scenes. Courts and scientific panels have repeatedly criticized footprint identification as lacking a strong empirical foundation. Other potential suspects were not definitively excluded as being the source of the footprints. When considering all the evidence in this case, do I believe that Jerry Westrom is guilty? In my opinion, he is guilty in reality, but I am not convinced beyond a reasonable doubt. It worries me that Jerry never had a chance to introduce all the alternate suspects that his defense wanted to include. One member of the jury who talked to the media implied it was the footprint that led to the guilty verdict. The problem is, the footprint is the weakest part of the state's case. What do I think happened in this case? This is just a theory, my opinion. Jerry Westrom was unable or unwilling to regulate his intake of alcohol, and he engaged the services of sex workers. He managed to convince people that he was an upstanding citizen who would never commit any type of crime, but he was living a double life. In 1993, while living in Minneapolis, Jerry engaged the services of Jeanie Childs. While he was in the apartment that she used for business, he removed his shoes and socks. During sexual activity, Jerry became angry and stabbed Jeanie about 65 times. He attempted to clean up the crime scene, but he did not do a very good job. The police hoped they could easily solve Jeanie's murder, but when the case turned out to be harder than they thought, they pursued other crimes. Jerry probably thought he would never be arrested for the murder. DNA was used to solve crimes in 1993. The first use of DNA in a major investigation was in 1986, but the police needed the DNA of a suspect to test. They did not know who Jerry was, and analysis based on genetic genealogy was still years away. One would think that Jerry would have kept a low profile after killing Jeanie, but instead, he was arrested a few times. He just couldn't say no to alcohol or sex workers, but what sealed his fate was his inability to resist hot dogs. Despite being guilty, Jerry managed to mount a pretty good defense, one that I believe was sufficient for a not guilty verdict. Ultimately, however, footprint analysis crept into the trial, and he was convicted. It's not all bad news for Jerry. At least now, in prison, he can enjoy hot dogs without worrying about leaving his DNA behind. Those are my thoughts on the case of Jeanie Childs and Jerry Westrom. Thank you so much for watching. I'll talk to you soon.